Hey folks, Mr. Justin here with Secret Weapon Miniatures and another look at Tablescape Realms. First, a shout out to Kathy Wapple for the awesome shirt. Thank you so much. If only were entirely true, at least of my mental health, if not the rest of me. But Tablescapes Realms, let's take a look. All right, so these are the couple of the photos, at least you saw at the beginning of the video here. And I want to highlight the fact that on the initial tile that has this recessed piece here, I was actually able to capture the recess under a layer of the realistic water, which gives me a chance to make it really look like it's, well, subset beneath the ice here and the frost. Creates a nice realistic look, and what I'm going to show you now is how simple this is to create. The other thing that I did was see if I could capture some of the ice and frost effect in the gap of one of the open floor tiles. And while I could, I definitely over applied the glass effect. It's very opaque at this point and not what I was looking for, so hopefully I can correct that this time, or did correct that. You guys get to see the finished result of this one before I do. So here we are. I have my tile and I have some paints here. I have in this case Reaper's Nightmare Black. You can also use the Tire Black. It has a nice gloss base. They're in the same range, but very different paints. I would be using Tire Black tonight, but I actually can't find mine. Nightmare Black is a great substitute. I have the Verdigris Blue, the Verdigris Pale Green from Secret Weapon, and the Weathered Wood. I'm going to use these in part because, well, of course, I get a great price on them, but otherwise, let's get started. So I'm actually just going to take the Nightmare Black and put it right on the model there. Again, remember, with any of the PVC products, you don't want to put an enamel primer on them. I also need my paint towel. So you don't want to put an enamel primer on them. If you're going to prime your PVC pieces at all, do make sure you're using an airbrush primer, something like a polyvinyl primer or something like that, or polyacrylic. So I'm just getting my brush a little damp. I definitely want to keep this paint wet while I'm working, because of course, as with my previous tile painting brush videos, I'm going to do this as quickly as possible, and I'm going to do it using a lot of wet blending techniques, also known as acrylic techniques. So I'm just getting that blue coat on there. Again, if I want to, I can use some subtractive techniques like a tissue or a paper towel to remove some of this blue as well if I wanted to show some gray later. All of the coats on top, of course. All right, I'm going to ditch my big brush there. Put my hand on the towel. And then pull out my brushes here, get the Verdigris Pale Blue. I'm sorry, Verdigris Blue. I'm actually going to put that, well, I actually put that right here where you can see it, instead of putting it, normally I would put it on my little water dish here. It gets quite colorful over time. Scrape that off periodically, but I'm going to put it right there so you can just see what I'm doing. I'm going to dip my brush into it. My brush is fairly wet. Should be. And as I go through here, I'm going to start finding surfaces. And I'm intentionally creating some texture here by brushing around. I want to create some variation. It's very similar to how I would do something like marble as well. Not quite the rose effect for a brush, but similar. And you can see I'm blending in some of that darker blue right on that one. And then coming back to make sure I keep my texture. Texture, 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 texture. If I'm missing a bit of dark color, I can always put some more on the palette here, or I can steal it from other places where I see it's particularly wet. Doing a little bit to mind the gaps on the tiles here, on the cracks here, but not a ton. A different goal today. And like I said, I'm working very quick, as you can see. Don't particularly feel the need to do a fast forward and voiceover on these. In this case, I'm going to get the brush a little wet. Come in and bundle this around a bit. And actually, yeah, I want a bit of that Nightmare Black over here. I would normally keep a bit out, just to make sure I can fill in the gaps like this, where I'm come in and I say, it's too bright. Because I can also fill that spot in, create some definition between those two 1-inch grid tiles. Oops. Get the spots where I see it looks like it's drying. Also get a little bit extra water in there. Keep all this damp. Right there on that. Wipe off my finger where I stuck it right into the paint. A little extra blue over here. You can see that with the wet blending, even coming back over with some of that bright blue, really makes it pop, despite the fact that's the color we were already using. I'm going to bring in the verdigris light green now. Same thing, just less of it. Wipe off the excess, because you're going to pick up some of that dark blue too. Hitting my edges, blending it, feathering, aiming towards that edge. Pull it back if you want to create some more of that texture. Get that nice ice sheen just by doing this, especially once it's coated in the gloss. I'm going to pull that towards the front this time, and then pull it back, blend that in. Nice variations there. All right, in this case, I'll follow that crack, and here. I'm going to pull this one in a different direction, specifically to create a bit more visual interest here. Try to avoid having everything go in one direction. I know if you're being a particular stickler about zenith of light, that may sound odd, but in this case we're talking about dungeon tiles. It's not a super crazy display, unless it is, and then do your own thing. But in the case of the dungeon tiles, just having it vary will add a bit of visual interest, but also make it easier to put the tiles side by side without it seeming incongruous if you decide to rotate them 90 degrees or something like that. Little blend, work faster. Can't start to take my time just because I'm having fun. Almost done. We are. giving it a bit more care initially than I really needed to, particularly if I'm trying to work quickly and get a whole tile set done. You can work a lot more quickly, particularly when you're working for something that really is a semi-random effect to begin with. It's easy for me to get caught up and say, oh, I want a little more blue here, which is exactly what I'm doing now, again. In this case, I'm having to thin it out a bit more because this section actually got dry before I could come back. You can put a dry time retardant into a project like this, and I actually have some within reach. I'm actually just in the habit of not using it because it creates a gloss effect, which in this case would not be a detriment. So by all means, grab your dry time retarders if you like. All right, for the ice, or at least for the blue sections here, the last but not least, I am going to put a bit of, probably don't even need that much actually, the weathered wood. Blend that in with just a little bit of the green. And then come back for a few edges. Aiming for edges. Keeping it wet. You'll notice it's not quite wash consistency, not quite glaze consistency, just wet. And I'm sorry to give you something so vague. It's not normally my way, but you want it to be nominally translucent. Just a little bit. And of course, you can always come back in with a bit of water to help it out. One of the things that helps make it interesting is if you also vary the location of the light. So I've got this light going across the line there. I'm going to keep it dark here. I can make the light come across this section instead. So right through here, 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 and right in through there. And then again, with a wet brush. I know you can do it with 2 brushes, but no thanks. I'm good. Hitting down this line, hitting down this line, getting my brush wet. A little too thin in that case. Pretty much taking that off. That's all right. I'll fix that over here. Nice. If I say so myself. So yeah, this is just that combination of a little bit of the verdigris pale green and the weathered wood. But you can see it looks, well, if I say so myself, pretty sloppy at this point. And that's honestly okay. You'll see on the finished pieces, or hopefully you did on the photos at the beginning, rather, that particularly once you get the gloss coat over it, having some rougher texture here actually really helps. You can get through the gloss, the shine of the gloss a little more easily, because the gloss is going to reflect a lot of that light. Having easier to define pattern under here makes it easier for that pattern to get out of the gloss shine. Which probably still doesn't make any sense, but hopefully someone out there can translate for me. So actually painting a little, not quite crosshatch. Well, actually, yeah, let's do some little crosshatch right here. In that spot, kind of a little ice effect. Outlining some edges. Getting my highlight on this edge, plug it in. Not resting my arms on the table. Do thin the paint. You can also create pools of this paint and let them dry, make it very thin, and you'll get a nice tide pool effect around it. It's a very random technique, but it's something that I've actually done for snow camos when I have the time to do it, because that's one where you generally have to allow 24 hours to dry between layers, and a good snow camo would take me 6 or 8 layers. But it really looked like, well, layered whitewash, which is exactly what it was. Go ahead and hit that edge again. All right, good. And now, very quickly, what we can do is at least get the base on for the wood. Let that dry while we do the next step. And then get carried away with some special effects. So this is the dark wood from Secret Weapon. Wait, dark wood, right? Woo! Good. I know, I should know, but a little bit of the dry blue or wet blue over here. That's fine, except that it's going to mess with me later, so I'm going to clean that out. Too heavy. Don't need all that paint down there. Fill in some spots where the dark blue is lacking, and I'd like it again. Clean my brushes. All right. So I'm going to have to let this one dry for a minute, but already you can start to see how those rough random effects are going to translate under the water effects, under the realistic water, excuse me. And especially once we fill this space in and do that realistic water, it's going to look great. So let's do it. All right, while we were paused, I went ahead and cut a piece of plastic card to fit under here and taped it in place. Nice thin stuff. It doesn't have to be anything. This is maybe a 1/2 mil tops. And what I'm going to do with that is grab my realistic water, boom, and begin to apply the snow. Now I can dry brush this if I want to, these dark spots if you want to make it a little lighter. I did not do that on the original tile, and I'm not going to do that here, but I could. What I haven't done is dry brush the lighter wood, the handle wood color over the bridge here, and I'll do that later. So I'm going to put a little bit all of these recessed areas here. Now this is going to drip off onto my cutting mat, and in my case, I don't care, that's fine. If you're worried about it, you can put some tape around the edge of your tile. Just tape, in fact. I'm also at the moment not worrying about air bubbles in the way that I would if I were applying this somewhere else. In part because I need to get some excess in there. And once I do that, I have a couple of options. I can use my finger, or I can take a brush and spread it out over all the tiles. I want to get a little bit on all the tiles. Not so much in the bridge. So I'll wipe that off with the Q-tips in a minute. And be careful when I'm applying the crushed glass. All right, put that in the water. Q-tip from my drawer. Touch that. Try again. Lots of shine on the top of that. All right. That should do it. Now I can just be careful where I sprinkle, and I am just going to sprinkle. So again, This is the crushed glass effect. Don't breathe it. Get on your hands. It can irritate. Sprinkle very carefully. The biggest piece of advice I have is that if you drop the whole container and you see a cloud of it come up, get out of the room, get out of the way in the same way that you would for a fluorescent light bulb or something like that. So I am just carefully sprinkling, I say, as I get a big old pile there. That's all right. So right now I'm very gently sprinkling each tile, getting a little bit everywhere. A little too much right there, but that's all right. Now coming back to my little snow piles. Right, those little piles of black would be gravel, I suppose, in the normal caverns. Pouring a little extra on top of those, obviously. I come in here and I'm going to get it a little extra in that recess down there by the bridge, but not too much. Even if I come over the bridge to get into its recesses, what I'm still going to do is come back with my Q-tip and make sure I get all of it off the top. And that's that. The biggest challenge with this particular effect is that, well, you're going to need to wait about 24 hours for it to dry. The end results, I definitely think, are worth it. I really like the effect that I get here. You can add a little bit of extra realistic water in a spot if you want to sprinkle on some additional glass snow. You can make your slurry like you normally would. Mix the glass and realistic water, apply it with a palette knife or a spoon or something like that. Not a spoon that you're going to use later. Get a nice little pile down here in this one. In fact, too much. I can also, if I do that, spread it out with my Q-tip. Allow me to also create a texture like that, footsteps if I want, or roll it off if I don't. And to ensure that it loses its texture, you can add a drop of realistic water over the top, which will run it down. But I did want to get a little more on that edge. Normally for display pieces, I will actually tap this off of a palette knife, so I'll actually grab something like this. Not my long one, mind you, but take it on a palette knife, scoop it off, and tap, 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 tap. On this long one, it's a bit difficult. And that's it. The rest is a matter of waiting for it to dry. So, you'll get to see the finished version, and you won't have to watch that part. Thanks again for watching. As always, I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next time.